I'm Dick Moberg, and for more than 40 years I've been developing technology to advance our understanding of the injured brain. I've had a chance to work with some of the leading minds in the field of neuromonitoring, including physicians, researchers, and entrepreneurs. I want to share their stories with you in the form of a weekly podcast so you can stay current on the latest developments in the field and the innovative people behind them. This is my neural network. Hi, I'm Dick Moberg, and my guest for this podcast is Dr. Ian Piper. So welcome.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dick. Pleasure to be here and to talk to you.
Yeah. And why don't you tell people, I know you're recently retired, and we just talked about how you probably never will retire, but tell us a little bit about your academic history.
Sure. Well, I studied physiology at Edinburgh University, and then I've always been a hobbyist in electronics. And I ended up going back to Toronto. I worked in a research lab in spinal cord injury research lab there for a few years. And while I was there, I decided to brush up on my electronics. And so I got a sort of a qualification in instrumentation electronics. And it turned out to be really quite a good step because it gave me the combination of the sort of engineering with a bit of the physiology. And most of my working life, I've ended up working in the field of intracranial pressure measurement, and it's kind of a field which just captured me. It made me, it's got technical challenges, and the physiology is interesting. And I've ended up working in neurosurgery departments where ICP monitoring is a core concept, and I saw at the time that there's lots of possibilities of different ways of capturing that data and different ways of analyzing it that potentially could, one hopes, alter clinical practice. But it didn't take me long, actually, before I realized that when I started to go to research meetings and I started to present the work that I was doing and discovered that I had difficulty comparing it against other groups because they were doing the same thing, but they were doing it a bit differently. They were collecting the data maybe at a different resolution or analyzing it in different ways. And it became quite frustrating. And you can see lots of people going to these meetings, presenting the same types of results, but not being able to compare. So that's how we ended up, as often these things do, in the pub afterwards, discussing the problems. And we came up with this idea, well, why don't we kind of try to work together collaboratively? And that's kind of the seeds of how BrainIT came about.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly a pioneer. And just to interject, I mean, you've been sort of one of my mentors in this field. I mean, I think we've led sort of parallel lives here for a while and certainly interested in the same thing. But, it's remarkable how you've gotten a lot of groups together here in Europe to focus on this. And that just hasn't happened in the U.S. So I'm really impressed by this. So continue this. Yeah.
It was serendipity, just being in the right place at the right time and meeting the right people. And as I say, at this key meeting in Williamsburg in the sort of early 1990s, we just happened to have the gel of the right people who actually believed in the same problem, and we were just at that generation where we weren't so concerned about our department doing well. It was all about more open collaboration and sharing information, sharing data. And in the field of traumatic brain injury, we were actually again, it was just timely, we were the first group in brain injury research that had this idea of trying to set up standards and collaborate and share data. And it was just happened to be there was a call from the European Union for grant opportunities in this type of networking activity. And so we were fortunate to get our first bit of seed funding, and that got sort of cemented the group together. And that led on to the next grant and the next grant where we could, get resources to collect data in a standardized way, and then share that data more openly. And it's led from there to realize that when you collect data in a very standardized way and have some sort of measure of clinical outcome that you can compare it against, then you can do some really interesting analysis from it. And just again, it's having the right people in there who say, well, I'm working with this group of data scientists in Leuven who've got some ideas about how to analyze things, but they need data. And that's kind of how we ended up meeting with Bart's group, for example. And through him, we met Fabian Guisa, and he had some very innovative ideas about how to visualize data. And that is, if you like, has cemented in our minds the importance of not working in a silo. And it's very easy to forget that you don't know everything. And you think you've got all the answers. And we've been analyzing this data for quite a few years now, and we realize that it's actually, our ideas are getting a bit stale. We've kind of come to the natural limit of our own experience, and one way to try to get fresh ideas in is to share this data with outside groups, and that's why last year we did our first datathon, and discovered, in fact, that there are clinical scientists out there and data scientists who are desperate to get their hands on this type of rich data set in a field that they think is relevant and a patient population which they feel they can contribute to. And it was a very worthwhile experience, and we discovered, in fact, that there's a whole world of new analysis out there that we hadn't considered. And from there, that's now led to us being at this ICP meeting and having our second datathon with the BrainIT data.
And I participated in that one, and it was amazing. I mean, it was a real eye-opener for somebody who's not, I don't consider myself a data scientist, but seeing the process from formulating a problem to analyzing it and coming up with some conclusions was really amazing. And we did that all in one day. It was amazing.
It's never enough time. Right. Yeah, no, I'm quite pleased how it goes. And the second datathon was quite interesting because it was more of a mix of clinicians. And we could see what the benefit was to them of actually being exposed to the process of how to analyze this data. And it's made us think that maybe we need to develop this into more of a formalized type of course that we can expose to clinicians who may eventually want to get into the field of machine learning.
No, I would recommend that. I think the time has come for that now. I mean, with machine learning really getting into medicine like it never had. I mean, it was sort of looked at a little weird, 10 years ago, but now it's just solving so many problems and you need the data before you can do data analytics. So you're at the heart of that. So I think that's
clean data as well.
Exactly.
And that for me is where I think the future of this area lies, is trying to leverage technology, which is out there. But we just haven't got the right bringing together the right people and the right ideas, and maybe we need to work more with small to medium-sized enterprises to be able to leverage some of these ideas as to how to maybe automatically collect this information and maybe have the right sensor technology so we can actually measure patient movement automatically. And the real challenge, and we've been trying to crack this problem for decades, is how to accurately annotate treatments. And how do we do that? Maybe there ought to be a technical solution out there.
Yeah, that's something we all struggle with, is the annotation. It's getting sort of that human in the loop to do that. That's good. And so, we are here at the ICP 2019 meeting, and you had a really nice BrainIT meeting, and I look forward to the next one in Bologna. Which
there's time, absolutely. Yeah, no, we've got some through the EU funding process. We've met and established some very nice collaborations with people all over Europe, and it's not just in the traditional countries you'd imagine. More and more Eastern European countries are being collaborating now, and it's actually refreshing to go out to those places and realize that in many ways they're quite advanced in their technology as well, but they have fresh ideas and different ways of doing things that some of the more Western countries don't normally. They get stuck in their ways how to do things. So it's interesting to see different ways of approaching the same problem.
And a reception has just started here, but it's part of the meeting. So tell me about, I heard a very interesting talk on the project with pediatric TBI. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Now that's really, again, being in the right place at the right time. I worked with a young intensivist called Millie Lowe, and we did a little pilot work together on the BrainIT project. And she's an intensivist who specializes in pediatric brain injury, and she saw what we've done in the adult traumatic brain injury with the BrainIT initiative and the collecting and sharing of data. And she realized that the pediatric brain injury areas is lagging behind the adult service a little bit in this way of more open sharing of data and collaboration. So she took it upon herself to say, well, we need to do the same thing in pediatrics. And she came to me and we talked about it and we discussed it with the BrainIT steering group. And we said, well, sure, let's create a sort of sub-project, leverage the experience of the BrainIT group, but try and see if we can do this in children. And so it was really through Millie's enthusiasm and her hard work that we managed to bring a little bit of seed funding. And that led to getting data from one or two centers and showing that it was feasible to collect the same type of data from children's brain injury intensive care units. And that led on to our first EU grant to bring in other centers, and now we have a specific research question that we're trying to address, and we've now got recruiting from 10 centers in the United Kingdom and 5 centers across Europe who've now joined the Kids BrainIT network, and it's actually great to see the enthusiasm now of a completely different domain, medical domain. And how the same problems exist in different areas. The idea that we're sitting on all this data, potentially could be using it, we're just wasting it. And is there any information in there that could help change our clinical management of patients? And so it's been refreshing to start the process all over again. I feel like I've turned the clock back 20 years.
That's great. And I think, pediatric patients are often overlooked. I applaud you in doing that. I mean, all the center TBI and tract TBI, almost all the TBI studies I know of are all adults. So I think this is, I applaud you for this work. I think it's wonderful. So I just want to point out to our listeners that the BrainIT website has a lot of information on it. They've started to develop some data collection standards. They have a proposal for common data elements on this, and I urge people to take a look at that. Is there anything else you want to say on your website?
No, I mean, please have a look at it. It's got a little bit of a history section of it. You can tell about, you see some pictures, some rather old photographs of us when we were young, but the people who initially brought it all together, but importantly, description of the different projects that we've been working on over the years, and our current project with Kids BrainIT and where we're going with that.
So what do you see for the future of BrainIT? In your future?
Well, I'm really excited about the Kids BrainIT project, and I'm acutely aware that I think there's a lot of growing interest in this collaboration. So I think that's going to go on for a few more years yet, I hope, and we'll get more funding to bring in more centers. But I'm really interested in trying to leverage new sensing technology out there to try to solve some of these problems that we've been thinking about for decades and still haven't solved. And we can send men to the moon. We ought to be able to work out some way of accurately timing the treatments that go on in intensive care units. You would think so. I'm sure there's ideas out, and there's newer microelectronic, sensors on a chip now that ought to be able to solve some of these things, flow meters and accelerometers and radar chips and things like that. So I think that's one of my how I'll divide my time between supporting the kids' brain IT infrastructure and see if I can interest in some small companies and brainstorming about how to take technology that might be in parallel or other domains and bring it into the medical domain and solve these problems.
That's great. It's a noble venture, and I certainly hope you succeed with that. It's well needed. And I want to thank you for this podcast. And any final comments? Are you?
No, but I look forward to you buying me a drink in the pub anytime soon.
You got that, especially in Leuven here. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being our guest.
Pleasure.
So thanks for listening to this week's podcast. If you enjoy these interviews, please take a moment to rate and review this show on your podcast app of choice. Subscribe to Dick Moberg's Neural Network to receive notifications when future installments are available. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again soon.